This is Plant-Based Briefing. Eating all things in moderation ravaged my athletic husband's arteries, by Rachel Schiera at forksoverknives.com. And I'm Marian Erickson, host of this curated content plant-based podcast, where I narrate articles with permission on a variety of topics related to plant-based and vegan living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And today's article is from forksoverknives.com. They were founded after the release of the now world-famous documentary Forks Over Knives in 2011. And their website is full of all kinds of resources, success stories like the one today, as well as articles about the latest research, recipes, there's a meal planner app, basically tools for every phase of people's plant-based journeys. And I highly recommend the documentary Forks Over Knives. If you haven't seen it yet, you can watch it free at forksoverknives.com. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Eating all things in moderation ravaged my athletic husband's arteries, by Rachel Schiera at forksoverknives.com. In July 2021, we were at mile 700-ish of a 1,000-mile bike trip from Indianapolis, Indiana to Washington, D.C., staying at a campground in the middle of nowhere when my husband, Tony, had the incident. He woke up in the morning and was just not right. He felt nauseated and he was visibly puffy. Given his high level of fitness and a recent string of hot days on our bike trip, we thought it was just dehydration. After all, we'd done about 2 weeks of 40 to 70-mile days with our bikes fully loaded with equipment. Whatever the cause, his symptoms were concerning enough that we made an emergency trip to a little country hospital nearby, where they were able to determine that his symptoms were indicative of cardiac issues. They had him transported to one of the top cardiac centers in the United States. There, the doctors found that Tony had 5 major arterial blockages and was at risk of a heart attack. He underwent coronary artery bypass surgery within 48 hours of admission. Questioning our quote-unquote healthy lifestyle. We thought our diet had been decent. All things in moderation was our motto. We loved olive oil, steak, butter, cheese, and grilled chicken. We assumed that diet was working for us both until Tony's quintuple bypass. After the surgery, our doctor said, "You might look great on the outside, but on the inside, you look like a very old man. Your arteries are in terrible shape." So as Tony was recovering, I started to ask around the cardiac center how we could change our lifestyle to support cardiovascular health upon discharge. The most common response I got was to up our activity levels, though a couple of staff members laughed as they made this recommendation, saying that we were already fitter than they were. I asked the cardiologist for dietary recommendations, and he responded that we should eat all things in moderation and follow the American Heart Association guidelines. When I remarked that is exactly what we'd been doing, he said, "Well, you could eat like a monk, but who can keep up that sort of thing? Just make sure that Tony takes the medication that we gave him and eat however you want." The cardiologist also made it very clear that we should expect to be back within the year for a stent and within 10 or 20 years for a redo of the bypass. Stumbling upon a solution. I started to read all that I could find about heart-healthy eating and stumbled upon the phrases carb-forward diet and whole food plant-based no oil. A librarian recommended the Forks Over Knives books to us. I decided that we would be eating whole food plant-based. It felt like a huge leap of faith. No one in our immediate orbit was whole food plant-based, and none of the health professionals we'd spoken to had suggested it. Still, we went all in on whole food plant-based 3 days after Tony was discharged from the hospital. The change seemed to work almost too well, so much so that it was almost frightening. Tony's energy levels improved daily, and he quickly recovered from the surgery. His blood pressure, which had been borderline high for a couple years, improved each day until the doctors had to take him off of his blood pressure medications because he was getting hypotensive. Cholesterol levels improved immensely for both of us, and we both began to drop weight easily. My running times steadily improved over the first 3 weeks until I had shaved 2 minutes off my average mile time. Part of this was definitely the weight loss, but I also found that I was breathing easier on my runs. After 3 weeks in the city where Tony had had his surgery, we were given the green light to go home. To our surprise, our doctor back home offered exactly what we had been looking for in terms of medical support. She was thrilled that we had made the change to whole food plant-based and told us that a few of her other patients had done the same and reaped the benefits in terms of their overall health, energy levels, and physical fitness. We were so encouraged to have her support, and we stuck with the new lifestyle. Just 3 months post-surgery, Tony was down nearly 40 pounds, and I had lost 10. Loving the whole food plant-based life. Today, we enjoy the same types of dishes that we ate before Tony's cardiac incident, just with different ingredients. Our cupboard is full of whole food plant-based staples like dates, whole grains, beans, and grape nuts, and our freezer and fridge are always stocked with fresh produce. We spent many years working in Asia, so we have made some adjustments to dishes we picked up there. We found that Korean and Indian recipes are easy to adjust for whole food plant-based. Tony's family is Italian, and much of what is familiar to him is still on the menu with adjustments. We also got an almond cow, which has been a fun addition to our kitchen. The main challenge we've run into is finding whole food plant-based meals while traveling. What we've discovered, though, is that people everywhere we go are curious about this way of eating and will generally go out of their way to try to make something that works for us. Because this diet so positively impacts health, we bring homemade whole food plant-based food to events and family functions so everyone in our families knows how we're eating and why we're eating this way. Earlier this year, we attended my cousin's wedding reception and brought our own date cake. Our families were very curious about what we had and wanted to try it. I guess that's what we're finding most often. People always want to try the food we bring, and they always want to know how it tastes so good. We feel so much better in general. For me, the greatest outcome has been a huge drop in my half marathon time, 15 minutes faster compared with a year ago, and no post-race soreness. To us, this way of eating feels like it's a must. You just listened to Eating All Things in Moderation, Ravaged My Athletic Husband's Arteries by Rachel Schiera at forksoverknives.com. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. And the cardiologist's response in this story reminds me of that famous quote from Dr. Kim Williams, past president of the American College of Cardiology, where he said, "There are two kinds of cardiologists, vegans and those who haven't read the data." And I love these success stories. I find them always so inspiring. And I think they're great to share with family and friends who aren't yet eating this way because they're just so positive. So please share this episode with someone who might benefit. And please take a second, if you can, to leave a 5-star rating for the podcast. On Apple, when you're on the podcast, scroll down past a handful or so of episodes, and then you'll see the place to rate and review. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you for listening.